I've been to these islands many times. First time in '98, and where I actually studied at UVI.
Velkommen.
Huh?
Velkommen.
Tak. I studied at UVI over in St. Croix at that time, and then I've been working with Caribbean history ever since. And what I'm going to tell you about today is the fruits of my PhD research, and I finished my PhD in my dissertation in 2010. So it's really a pleasure to finally be able to be here and talk about it. What I'll be talking about is, I'll talk about a number of individuals who lived, especially in St. Thomas, but also in St. Croix and maybe even in St. John, enslaved and free people of African descent who lived here in the middle of the 18th century, between 1730 and 1760. That's sort of the time period that I'm working with here. And I'll try to tell a little about from where they came, and also try to give a picture of how their origin in different African societies and how they use that origin in their forming of new networks in these islands. But I'll begin with one very important person. And of course it's very light in here, so maybe you could take the light down a little, if possible. Because this is actually the drafts for a letter that was written in 1739 here in St. Thomas, and it was sent together with other letters to the Danish king and queen at that time. The king was called Christian VI, and the queen was called Sophie Madlena. And these different letters were part of a petition that, or formed a petition to the king and queen, in order for them to. It was sent from the Moravian missionaries and from the African Caribbean members of the Moravian Church, because they felt that they were not sort of well supported in this island, that there were many people, especially plantation owners, who did not who tried to sort of get them out of the island, because these plantation owners thought that if enslaved people became Christians, then they would also demand their freedom. That was sort of a tale that was going around in these societies, that Christianity equaled freedom. Obviously, we think that it should have done, but it didn't. So these Moravian missionaries who came in first time in 1731 to St. Thomas and started doing mission around the countryside and the plantations, they really felt that that they needed to make sure that everyone understood that they were not promoting freedom for the enslaved people, but they were promoting freedom in Christ, that is, freedom in the afterlife. So they did many things, and one of the things they did was that they wrote to the king, because if you have the support of the king in what you're doing in this time of life, then it would be much easier to make everyone else support you. But it was not just the missionaries who wrote, and that's really where this tale begins. Can you take down the light a little just for 1 second? Because I want you to look a little at this letter. As I said, there were also in this petition, in this among these letters to the royal family, there were letters written by the members of the congregation who were of African descent, that is, the people who were actually the ones the missionaries tried to convert into Christianity. And some of them had already become Christian and were members of the congregation. So, one of the letters is this one. And it was written by the woman who had been baptized 2 years prior in 1737 under the name of Madlena. Nice German name, maybe named after the Danish queen. But the thing is that the letter was written in a language from Africa, in an African language. And the draft for it is here. And it says something like Niakada, Kabe Mili Adga Tome, and it goes on. And then it's signed Minsu Grono En Ho Me Popo Dama. And as of my knowledge, it's the only written source sort of narrated by an African-born woman from these islands that's written in an African language. So it's an amazing source. I mean, it's really, I sat many years ago in the archives in Herrnhut in Germany and fell over this letter, and it was just one of these days where you almost cry because it's so fantastic that you find such a source. But of course, I didn't know this language, so I couldn't read it. But then on the other side of the letter, there was a translation into the language that people in this island used to communicate with each other if they were not, you know, so that they could communicate even though they had different mother tongues, and that's the Dutch Creole. And it even says here, translated into Creole. And of course that was still a little easier for me to actually read. So I think I'll just, maybe we can turn on the light again and I can just read aloud the translation into English. So you get the idea of what it is, or actually it's here. Great Queen, when I was living in Popo in Africa, I served the Lord Mawu, and when I came to the land of the whites, I did not want to serve the Lord. I had not a reason to serve the Lord yet. Now I am sad within my heart that black women cannot serve Lord Jesus on the island of St. Thomas. The whites do not want them to serve the Lord. Let it be as they wish, but if poor black sisters and brothers want to serve Lord Jesus, they must do it, whether in secret. Or they have to do it in secrecy. Sorry, it's a bad translation. The Queen permitting, I want to ask Lord Jesus among us, and I ask the King to give Pastor Martin, who was the leading missionary, the permission to preach the Lord's word and baptize us Negroes in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. May God bless you, your son, daughter, and the whole family, and I want to ask Lord Jesus to come to you. From 250 Negro women who love Jesus, written by Marotta, now Madlena, from Popo in Africa. And then what's here, that's the signature on the other letter, the African version. So this is a very traditional Moravian-style letter where you refer to the Lord and to Jesus, and talk about your cravings of the heart for Christ and for religion. But within this letter, that is where the focus is the religious, I can or you can sort of drag out really interesting information about this woman's history. Because most important of all, she's undersigning herself Madlena from Popo in Africa. And Popo is actually a place that we know of. There are actually two Popos. Popo is, the two Popos are situated on the borderland between the two countries that are now Togo and Benin. in this period of time, the Europeans called that part of Africa the slave coast. So it's really, I mean, very obvious what they came for there, human cargo, and and it's a part of Africa where people speak languages that are of the Gbe family. And actually you can see when you look at the writing in the African letter that it's this language family. So it corresponds, the sort of linguistic information that we can draft out of the, or drag out of the writing in the African letter, and then the fact that she writes that she's from Popo in Africa. So now it's interesting that we have sort of probably established where she was from. Furthermore, it's interesting to see then that she refers to the Lord as Mawu, and in that part of Africa, the religious system, it's actually very close related to the religions of or the Yoruba religion. It's very similar. It's called the Fon religion, and there is a sort of main god that's a double god, Mawu Lisa, which is the female and the male representatives of the universe. So Mawu is here. So we have another sort of sign pointing towards the fact, underlining that she has the sort of her roots in that area of Africa. So that's really interesting, I think, because what we always really would like to know was actually to establish those ties across the Atlantic, because of course we all know that the people who ended here as enslaved, they had lives before then. They had families, they had, you know, cultures and ways of doing things, and they had houses and yards and villages, towns. They had whole lives in Africa. But somehow the silence of the sources, the silence of what is written, cuts these lives off by the transatlantic journey. So many of the people that we encounter in the sources, we do not encounter them until they set foot on this island here. So these little pieces of information that we can sort of gather from letters like this and other sources that I'll talk more about is really valuable. But the third thing that is even more interesting, and which is, it's kind of maybe a complicated thought in my mind, so I really hope that you can follow me on this thing. And I think we need to go back. Can I do that?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Sorry, it's just a little slow. And I think you can see it here. It is that if you look at this translation into Creole, you have the signature of Marota, now Madlena, of Popo in Africa. So it basically tells us she used to be called Marota, now she's called Madlena. That makes sense, because if you are not a Christian and then you're baptized, you usually get a new name because you get your Christian name. So you say, okay, of course she's been baptized Madlena, and before that her name was Marata. But then of course there are other sources from this Moravian church, and luckily they have their baptismal records all the way back. So I thought, okay, that's great, I'll go find her in this. So I did, and she was there. She was number 8, I think. Number 8 of people who had been baptized in St. Thomas. One of the really early baptismals. But then there was something different, something quite amazing. And it is that in the baptismal record, yes, her Christian name is Madlena, but her name before that, it's always stated in these records that the Christian name and then the name before that. It said not just Marotta. Marotta was there, but it said Dama Marotta. So it's, that's interesting. Because if you look at the African letter here, there's no Marotta, there's no Madlena, there's only Dama. When you put a line over a letter in these old sources, it means that there are two of them. So it's D-A-M-M-A. So she was Madlena before Marotta Dama. And then I really started to philosophizing, because then I kind of reached the conclusion that this meant that she did not only have 3 stages of sort of who she was, the Christian Madlena, the pre-Christian Marotta, but that she maybe, or 2 stages, that she maybe had 3 stages. So what I think is that Dama was her original name, because that's the one she uses when she uses her African language. Probably Marotta was the name that she was given by a plantation owner. Maybe when she set foot on this island, maybe later on, you don't really know. But the thing is, and we know very much that it was quite common for owners of enslaved humans to actually just give those human beings new names and use them to them. But that did not mean that those people did use these slave names themselves. Of course not. Some of them maybe did, some of them took them on. We don't know so much about that. But this, I think, is really a very important documentation of the fact that there were areas where these plantation owners did not manage to sort of erase this African person.
Question?
Yeah.
This happened before Brother Cornelius visit Denmark,
Yeah,
right?
it did. This was in the 1730s, so okay. It was in the beginning. So I think that this was her African name, and I think the fact that this letter that was written as a petition to the Danish Queen to support the mission also supports the fact that becoming a Christian didn't mean that you erased your African background. And sometimes when we talk about this past and when we talk about mission and so on, we tend to see it as a very big clash between sort of Christian European culture and then native African culture, and to have this idea that the two did not necessarily work together, but that there was only either or. You couldn't do both. But I think Madlena, Marotta, Dama, whatever we should call her, she actually somehow used all of these names simultaneously, and I see it as an expression of the fact that she did not erase away the African woman, but she kept that part of herself, even though she added further to her person. So in that sense, this letter is, I think, really an amazing source, and of course also for other reasons. Well, also she's a really interesting person because she, to add further to it, we know a little more about her because the missionaries met her and described her. And the fact is that one of our really big issues in working with this thing and in being interested in the people of African origin is that very few people of them actually managed or got access to writing down their own version of this history. So we always have to go through somebody else's version of it. And that's really a great challenge. Sometimes it's an interesting challenge, but of course we would just have loved for her to just have written down her story herself, because then we would have had her version of it. But when the missionaries encountered her in 1736, or when she met the missionaries, they described this meeting with her because she was a fascinating person. She was, they said, very devout. She really was a very religious person, and I think that, and they described how she worshipped every day in her house. So we know she had a house. She was actually free when they met her. She had been enslaved at the Mosquito Bay plantation out where the airport is today. Lindbergh Bay. But at this time she was free. Maybe she had been freed because she got quite old and couldn't work anymore. But it could also be that she had, you know, some special relation with the owner, and that at least her son was also a big favorite of the owner, Johan Lorenz Carstens. But anyway, they described her religious, very devout religiosity, and that she sacrificed by burning parts of animals. And they talked to her, and they noted already by then that they thought that she would really be somebody that would be interested in Christianity, because she had this basic religious attitude before that. And then somehow they started talking, and she got interested in Christianity, and she was baptized. But another really strange thing is then about her, that normally when you became Christian, you would have to, of course, adopt all African religious practices, because the missionaries did not see that corresponding with Christianity. But the fact is that they described how she once a year continued to make a sacrifice in her house to the Lord. And I'm thinking, but in a way that really is not a normal Christian Moravian way. So somehow she also managed to hold on to some sort of practice that was that originated in her original religious culture. And one interpretation could be that she maybe continued to renew the bond to her ancestors, which is something that we know was very widespread, of course, in the community here, and which was also something that was quite complicated, because what do you do when you're not in the space of your ancestors, when you're torn away? Then you have to maybe find new ways to do it, because maybe the culture you come from is a culture where it's very much connected to the actual ground you're on, or the actual places where the ancestors is buried. So, so she did that, but still she managed to have this very important role in this Moravian church. She became the elder of the congregation, and when she died in 1747, she was buried at a large funeral. And thus she became one of the leading members, one of the first really important members of this congregation, and somehow it's kind of fascinating that she was also one of the people who really managed to express her African background.
Question?
Yes?
As far as the literacy, literacy goes, I can't really tell, but are the letters in the African on the left side the same letters on the right side?
It's the same letters, and the thing is that it's probably not Dama or Madlena who wrote it. We have nothing from her hand, but we think, based on this style of writing, that it might have been her son who wrote this for her. And her son was called Domingo Jesu. I don't know if you have heard about him. It's not Mingo Tamarind, who was a very well-known leader of the Free Negro Company, or what it was called. But it was Domingo Jesu. He was enslaved to Johan Lawrence Carstens and worked for him as an overseer, and but lived actually in town and was very literate. And we have many letters that he has written to Johan Lawrence Carstens and his family particularly. And it seems that it's the same hand that's written it. And that makes sense.
So did the people in Popo write?
Yeah.
I mean, were they literate, or?
I don't think they wrote. And also, that's one of the reasons why it's kind of maybe difficult to decipher every word, because I think it's written, you know, from ear to letter. I don't know, phonetically, because there wasn't there wasn't a sort of a written language for this language, but it's been done like that. And then, of course, in the Dutch Creole, at this time, a written version of Dutch Creole was evolving. Professor Cooper will have to correct me on that if
1730s, 1730s, very early stages.
Yeah.
The Creole might have been there's, of course, you know, we weren't there, so we don't know.
No, but it's.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah,
because
there are many.
We can only speculate, give an educated guess.
What year did they come out with the Bible in Dutch Creole?
That's in the 1760s.
Yeah, that's a little bit after.
1760.
But here you have all these handwritten letters in the Dutch Creole.
Well, at that point, the Creole, so according to some Creolists, who do historical studies in this, according to some, there are basically two or three schools of thought. One school of thought suggests that, you know, the Creole was more like a field Creole, was more Africanized. The other theory is that, you know, it was more like a church Creole, strongly influenced or introduced by the missionaries, the Moravian missionaries, who the background of, you know, their language was basically Germanic. So there are at least two schools of thought about that.
And maybe there were also different sort of kinds.
Yeah.
But people who attended the Moravian church meetings often were taught to write. And so there are like stacks of letters that members of the congregation have written, both as, I think, little writing sort of practices, but also letters that were sent out to other congregations around the world, to Greenland, to North America, and so on. That was part of this whole, you know, world surrounding congregation.
Were the planters against that?
Some of them were, especially in the 1730s and beginning of the 1740s, but then they realized that it did not change their right to suppress people and enslave them, so then they started supporting it, most of them. So, but in the beginning there was, you know, a little objection. But some, like Johan Lawrence Carstens, the man who actually owned Mosquito Bay, I think he was actually more or less integrated into the Moravian congregation himself, so he supported it strongly. So I just want to make a short note about origin, because as you could hear, Madlena came from Popo, about here, in the Togo, Benin area. But the fact is that, as you probably all well know, that Europeans brought enslaved people from all of this area and way inland. So to the whole of the Americas, people came from a vast area. So when you came to the coast here, Charlotte Amalie, and were sold off to some plantation and put into some village, you didn't necessarily encounter someone who could speak your language. And it was, for many, we can see in sort of the outside descriptions that, for instance, the missionaries did, it was quite traumatic, because you really had to start building new networks. That's also why we can see that some of the networks that were formed on board the slave ships actually lasted lifelong. That we have people referring, old people who are in sort of sick and dying, that they ask for their shipmates, the people who came on the ship with them, to be fetched, because that's really the people that are their new family. But one of the things that we tend to maybe think is that because Denmark had its forts on what was then called the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana, which is sort of the Akan-speaking area, that we tend to think that probably because of that, everybody who came here on the slave ships were also from that area. But when we then go into and look at lists of origin, we see that it's not like that. Where do we know this from? Well, the missionaries of the Moravian Church is again a really good source to this, because they actually, at least in the beginning, up until the end of the 18th century, every time they baptized someone, they also noted the origin of this person. So it could be that this person was a Creole, born in the islands. It could also be that this person was from somewhere in Africa, of course, and then they stated from where in Africa. So they wrote that this person was Popo, Fong, Hamina, Congo, so on and so forth. But of course, not everybody was a member of the Moravian congregation, so it's a sneak peek into the sort of knowing that we can see, where people came from. Yes, there was a question.
Yes, I just wanted to know, did the Crown ever receive the letter, and what was their response? And did they write back or get in touch with Morocco?
Yeah, they received it because I found the letter in the Danish archives. They did not respond, at least not to her. They responded in the way that they continued allowing the missionaries to work here, but they did not write back to specifically the members of the congregation. And what was the last question?
Well, that's basically it.
Yeah,
because you were talking about what she wrote, and I wanted to know, how did the Crown receive it, and what action did they do?
It was just put into what was called the mission office, so I'm not even sure that the king actually saw it himself, but the Danish authorities got it. One quick note, I will let you speak in a minute. Actually, I have been working with in Ouida in Benin today, close to, no, actually in Popo, in Grand Popo in Benin today. There's a small exhibit opening now about the slave trade, and an artist from Benin has made a sort of a cartoon about her life to be hung on the walls there, to sort of depict this this history like that. And then some of the people wrote me and asked if it wouldn't be nice if we could have the present-day queen actually answer her. So we're going to try to work on that, but I think it will be very hard. But it would be kind of,
She might.
Well, you don't know. It's very political, as you all know, this thing. So, sorry?
Good thing. Did the slave ship manifest, like when the slave was purchased, didn't they have where the slaves was from? In the manifest of the slave?
Not in the Danish records. In some of the other countries' records, especially in the Portuguese and Spanish records, you can find that, especially for the early period.
And it's French.
And also French. For some periods you can see that. You can of course see where the ships stopped, but you don't know, because you know, as you know, many of the people who were shipped from one fort, they might have been walking for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, so you don't really necessarily know from where they came. But the thing is also, how can we know that it's true? Because who is it that's writing this thing down that Madlena, well, now Madlena, there's the letter, that's a specific, but somebody else, okay, so he's Amina. How do we know that it's a piece of information that comes from this person himself and not just something that's sort of put onto him, that somebody else says, okay, you must be Amina? Actually, again, these missionary sources are really good at sort of making that discussion, because some of the missionaries have described how they walked around in the villages and how they sat down with members of the congregation after church and asked them about their backgrounds. And now, why did these missionaries have an interest in this? Of course, it's not just, because they thought that it was interesting to know about the world. That was a reason. The reason was that they thought that if they knew what kind of belief systems and ideas about the world that the people they wanted to convert had originally, then that it would be easier for them to know how to talk to them and sort of convert them into Christianity. But that's where this sort of our way of working with these historic sources is really important, because still it's the best we get. We can see that there are actually people who originated in Africa who tell about their origins. So in that sense, we have the information. We know that the information about their specific origin actually comes from themselves and is not just put onto them from outside. Did you have? Yes, a brief question.
But what makes the narrative? For instance, she didn't write it herself.
No.
Okay. As in with Venture Smith, who came out of Cape Coast Castle, actually did write his own narrative. You're familiar with it?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and that was a very large operation they ran there. They shipped many of the people directly from Accra and Ghana. So they did have a relationship on the ship, and then when they were transported.
Yeah.
And they were seen as family because they were all
exactly.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And also you can see, that there are descriptions that when people came off the ship, they were usually put. Sometimes they were actually like staying in the ship for a number of days, which I think must be horrible, that you can actually sit there and see land and you were not being allowed off. At the same time, you don't know what to expect. But they were put into, for instance, one of these company buildings to stay there until they would be sold off. And there is a description by the missionary called Oldendorp from the 1760s, that when a ship comes in and these people come off the ship, put in this company building, then he sees how people come from the island and walk down to this building, because new people are in the yard, and they start talking. The people who are already on the island start talking to these new people and search out people with languages so they can communicate. So imagine to be there and then actually realize that somebody comes to talk to you. And there are also descriptions, also in Oldendorf, then that then there was what they called they called a newly arrived enslaved person a bosal. So a bosal baptismal, that there sort of evolved traditions where you sort of was initiated into the new sort of the slave society, and you had sponsors or godparents who then sort of took you on and then were responsible for you. So there were lots of systems, and based on this information, it's very clear that obviously they also worked along these lines of origin because language was so important. That was really an important basis for that. So I don't know how much time I've got left. Okay.
Keep going. This is fascinating.
On language, how many tribes had a written language?
It's been a while, but I think I have maybe around 40 different sort of tribes or nations. But then also it's some of them, this is a little complicated, so please ask because it's complicated in my head. I think some of them, for instance, the name Amina that you all know from the slave revolt in St. John in 1733, where it's described very clearly in sort of the Europeans write it's the Amina who revolt. But then they also say that is the Akwamu. So it was, why did they call them the Amina if it was the Akwamu? The Amina is not a name of a people on the Gold Coast. There are nobody there called the Amina. It's a term that evolves here in America. And the thing is, it evolves different places, but it has different meanings whether you're in Brazil or Cuba or in St. Thomas. So it's, I mean, to work with this is so complicated. But I think that Amina was probably mainly in the beginning, that it mainly in the beginning consisted of people who were Akwamu, but they managed to incorporate other people who might have come from the same area into this group, because, I mean, it's a new situation. We're here. Maybe we have more in common here than split us apart when we were over there.
Were they Arabic-speaking slaves?
I have seen very, very few references to it in this, but we know from other sources, from other areas of the Americas, that there are quite a large communities of Arabic-speaking people. I have seen a few references to it.
Because I understand the Danish used to separate Hafiz.
Yeah.
The ones who was Hafiz from the rest of the slaves.
Yeah. Very little I've seen, but it doesn't mean they weren't there.
Oldendorf mentions a few of them.
Yeah, a few. He does. So there has been, but it's a little, yeah. There was a question here.
Would there ever be records in any of the slaving forts?
Regarding the origin of people from the forts? I haven't seen it, but then it's a huge archive, so it's, yeah, I don't, there might be, yeah. Yes?
I wanted to know, how many forts did the Danes have along the Gold Coast?
I think it was...
And where were they located?
I think it was 5, all in all. There was the big one called Christiansborg. That was where Accra, the capital of Ghana, is today. And then there were 4 small forts, but it's a little embarrassing because I don't quite remember if it's 3 or 4 of the small ones. But some of them operated for a very short period of time, and some of them for a longer period of time. But there were some to the east of Christiansborg and some to the west. So,
They had some in Trangibar too.
Yeah, but that's India.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about India.
Most people don't even know about that.
No, I could tell you more about that. I've been working with that. Yeah.
Why are in Africa they called Frederiksborg and called Fredrikstad here or Christianstad?
Well, Borg is castle and Stad is town.
Okay.
So that's why.
Okay.
So let's move on. So anyway, no, just my point is that when I look at these early sources from the sort of early 18th century, and I started, counting all the sort of names I had and where did people actually come from, and I realized that at this time, based on a part of the population, the part that was sort of affiliated with the Moravian Church, which means that it's not good for any sort of real statistics, but the largest group at this time was people from the area where Madlena came from what was then called the Slave Coast, the Fon area. So this area. The second largest was people from the Congo-Luango area, West Central Africa, whole other place. And then after that, you have people from the Gold Coast. So it just means that we have to sort of revise this idea about, just linking to the Gold Coast, because it was much more scattered than that. And it also seems there are some sort of indications that maybe also this Moravian sort of wave of Christianity also moved along the lines of some of these groups. For instance, people from the Slave Coast or the Fon-speaking area. So, anyway, we can sort of say more about where people came from, but then how did that express itself? So this is a picture from Brazil, because we don't have any pictures like this from the Danish West Indies, but we have descriptions of the same thing. In many African societies, still today actually, they use sort of scarification to where you cut little cuts in the skin and put some herb sap into it, so it sort of rises, and then you make some different sort of patterns. The Europeans very much thought that you could identify the nation of people based on these scarifications, but actually often it's something that's done when you have transitions in your life, so it's more a matter of your status or where you are in life and so on. But this is a picture, sort of a document from Brazil where some missionary tried to sort of show all of these different aspects of how people use this scarification and different styles of how people looked. But we have descriptions of the same customs here in Denmark or in the Danish West Indies. For instance, Oldendorp describes it in the 1760s. And the thing is that when there was something going on that looked exotic to the Europeans, they sometimes describe it because they sort of think that this is interesting, we need to describe it. So because of that, Oldendorp did that. And he describes it as something that people had brought with them from Africa. So, this had been done to them in Africa, and then they, of course, still have these scars when they came here. But I'm thinking, if we can establish that people kept on thinking of themselves as belonging to some sort of nation group, wouldn't it be logical that they also continued using, for instance, scarification to mark transitions in life and social standing and so on? So this is not something I can say that I know a lot about, but just to say that this is where one of the places where the sources are really silent. That can have a thesis that cultural expressions probably went on, but we don't know so much about it. What we know, though, thank you.
Sparkling.
Okay, and can you give me some sort of note when I'm supposed to stop?
We're here all night.
Yeah, okay. But you know, I can talk for hours and people. What we know, though, this is also, it's a picture from the American South, and of course is depicting a dance in a village. But that's one of the things that we have many descriptions, that how dance is an important way of connecting in these villages, in the plantations. If you get up very early in the morning and you work in the fields all day and you almost have no spare time, obviously this Saturday evening dance is really, really important. But then from time to time, so I mean, it's naturally that must have been an important social thing. But then there are, from time to time, descriptions of dances. Sorry, I had a bad cold. It's almost over. That points towards another direction, and that is naturally that the dances were not just amusement, but they were also part of religious gatherings. And again, to go to the missionaries, the owner of Mosquito Bay, Johan Lawrence Carstens, also had another plantation, which was on the north side, called the Pearl. And he was this really fun supporter of the mission, so he really wanted everyone on his plantations to convert into Christianity. And there
Excuse me, his name was Castle?
Carstens.
Oh.
Yeah, he later moved to Denmark actually, but he was born in St. Thomas in 1705. So the missionaries really benefited from his help. He actually purchased the plantation that became New Herrnhut, where the church still is. He purchased that for them. So the missionaries worked out of his plantations. And then maybe you would think that, of course, people in his plantation might just, you know, convert into Christianity, all of them. But the thing is, when you look at the baptismal records, they did not. Very, very few of the people in his plantations actually converted in the first big wave of conversions that took place in the late 1730s, early 1740s. It's really interesting because there's always been this tale about how his plantation was sort of the epicenter of Christianity among the enslaved population. So I was looking at these lists and thinking it's kind of strange that it's on Peter de Wind's and Hans Clausen's plantations that all of these people convert in the beginning. And very few of the people on his plantations are. So what was happening? Because, I mean, there were sermons there almost every night. So, in the diaries of the missionaries, I just stumbled upon one sort of day note, which was that Frederick Martin, this missionary, the leading missionary that Marotta or Madlena also referred to, that he had been ill, so he had not been out missionizing for a number of days. And then he sort of got himself out of bed and walked all the way up to the Pearl, and then there was a big dance going on. And the dance was led by one of the bombas, one of the foremen of the working gangs. And he was outrageous because now he had been working and people might have been listening to his sermons and so on. And then they were just, you know, having this dance and which was, in his opinion, quite contrary to you know, converting to Christianity. But he was really told off that he should not meddle in this. So he had to go away without, you know, being able to stop this dance. And so you could see, was it just a dance for fun, or was it actually a religious ritual that was going on here? Oldendorp describes very detailed rituals that corresponds to the Yoruba practice, where you have orishas, deities that goes into people's bodies, and they dance specific dances. And these sort of rituals are very detailed, described in Oldendorp's descriptions. So I mean, it's quite clear that there were lots of religious networks that were functioning all the way up through time, beside the fact that people started converting into Christianity. So we need to realize that even though we have sources that only gives us small peeks into African culture here, that it was really going on. And you have people who were born in the islands who spoke African languages. So they must have learned it from their parents. So there are so many signs that the African culture did not just go away just because people were sent to here and from the slave ships. Actually, one of the very important people, I'll just show very quickly, in the Moravian history, Anna, who was sort of the first fruit. She was the first person that the missionaries talked to when they came here. She was born Fong, B-O-U-N-G. That's sort of the German way of writing something that sounds like Fong. And she struggled all her life. She really wanted to be part of the church, but at the same time she had a husband who had dances with drumming in his house. This is actually a drum from the Gold Coast in the National Museum collection. But she was baptized and she stayed in the church, even though from time to time it was a little difficult for her. And she was actually buried. This is New Herrnhut Cemetery. Some years ago, when the grass was not so high as it is today, she was actually buried here alongside the European missionaries, which I think not so many people know that there were actually African members buried here. So she was sort of in the middle of this, you know, these African gatherings that her husband had, and then her wanting to be part of that church. So it was not always easy. And of course, people met along these nation lines. They created networks based on where they came from, but of course the plantation village was also a very important network. I just really wanted to show you this picture because it's Oldendorp who drew it. And in 1768, it's from La Grande Princesse, or the Great Princess, over in St. Croix. And you can really, it's the house belonging to a couple who were members of the congregation, Aquila and Priscilla. And you can really see these little houses, how they were built, wooden and thatched roof. And you have another house here, and maybe a little cookhouse here or something, or a storehouse. And then also you have like a little garden here. So probably there were vegetables grown here. And it's one of these few depictions of a plantation village that we have that is so old. But of course, from along the time, people also started using other ways of making networks. So the church was important. The village was important. slowly people began mixing, and along that way, at some point the slave trade ended, so new generations grew up that did not have that direct connection to Africa, and that's how more and more sort of a mixed Creole culture, of course, evolved. But still with all of these different elements in it. And just to stop, and it's not a very good picture. You know that? I had not seen that before. At Annaberg, these little drawings in this dungeon of maybe of the great house up on the hill, but also of the small ships here. So people who have been contained in that dungeon has probably been drawing on the wall what they saw, but maybe they also thought about the ship that they had come on. Ship and the sea was this, you know, connection back home. And in one of these huge amounts of pages of writings that these missionaries made, there was one conversation that really struck me, because there was one of the female missionaries. It was the female sort of talked to the female converts, and she talked to a young woman who had come on a ship, and she was really sad. And then she said, "When I die, I'll come back to my mother in Africa." And I think that even though I can tell about Madlena, who managed to make her life and become, you know, this important member and hold on to her African name, and there were so many people who really managed to, you know, create a life and to go on living, but there were also many who perished in this, and the idea of the ancestors and of the home that you had lost was, of course, always there. And I think that when I saw these little ship paintings, that was really, you know, the sort of the essence of that we always have to remember. And I think, and now I'm saying something that's maybe not always not very nice to my fellow country people, but sometimes in Denmark you have discussions about the history of slavery and the history of the West Indies and so on, and many people are really interested in it, and very people really do understand the implications of it all. But there are, from time to time, you encounter people who say, you know, the peasants in Denmark was also very harshly treated, so I mean, whatever. And then this is it. That's the reason why it's not the same. Because the peasants in Denmark were not taken away from their families, and they were not torn away from everything that they knew. And it's just that's the difference. I mean, there are always people who are treated badly. But that's really the big difference here. So I think that even though we can recognize that the people had all these extremely powerful abilities to lead their lives and go on and survive, we also have to remember that there were people who were just thinking about that when they die, they'll go back to their mother. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your very stimulating talk. As you know, I would have eaten up every bit of detail, you know, very enthusiastically. I just wanted to observe something that I find very interesting as a linguist. The content and the strength of the personal voice and the agency of the message in Madlena's letter seems to differ considerably from the formulaic language, the testimony about, you know, Jesus washing in his blood, that many of the other quote-unquote Moravian converts use. I just wanted to point that out, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that, you know, she was born in Africa and had recently come over. But, you know, I just wanted to make an observation. I find it to be interesting. Do you know of other letters?
Not like that.
Like this?
I think the reason why it's so powerful is because it also contains part of her personal story. Yeah.
It's more secular than most of the other letters I've read.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. We just have a new batch of new African missionaries come to St. Thomas.
Okay.
And they're from Cameroon. And one says to me, Dale, I'd like to learn your culture. His thesis is in enculturation. And they don't talk about pagan customs, they talk about their traditional practices. And it's a rare contrast and how truly developed. It's very interesting to talk to these folks. It's beautiful. No question about them being African either. All them blacks is great.
Yeah. Interesting. Any other questions?
That photo there, how old is that? Do you know? Because you go all there today, you don't see anything.
It's from yesterday. So it was just taken with my phone.
Down in the,
but I know that Kenwa from the Park Service promised to send some better photos of it, so I'm sure he'll do that. But I just really wanted to include it because I had never seen it, or noticed, or don't remember that I'd seen it before. So it was just really powerful experience to sort of realize that it was there.
I think they had something like that in down at Fort Question too.
Okay.
But I don't know what they.
And in Puerto Rico at the fort at San Juan there should be some too.
30 years ago that was much more distinct.
What relationship the Brandenburg Company had with the Danish?
The Brandenburg Company, that was complicated because they were kind of, you know, battling for power, I think, at some point. They had, of course, were allowed to have this space here and then to trade in people. But it seems like there's always, you know, little knickknacks going on between them. But they were here for a very short time, actually. But I think that the Danes were a little afraid that they would be more successful than them. But I don't know so much about that.
It was German Jews.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, they made a very deep impression in the Virgin Islands because the governor of the Virgin Islands wears one of the symbols when he gets sworn in every year.
Okay.
Where the swastika in German?
One of them on his neck.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Every governor wears it.
Thank you for that
It's like wearing a swastika.
Yeah. But it all, I mean, that points towards the fact how
it's like a Jewish wear a swastika.
How important the old history is that it's still, you know.
But there's some scholars who connect the swastika to a sort of ancient symbolism, you know, going back to Hebrews and even other Hindus and so on.
Yeah. I don't know so much about that.
Well,
yes.
Just to conclude, I think the Jews were allowed to bring slaves in boats. They weren't allowed to have plantations.
I haven't heard much about
I
that.
saw it here. That's what
in Brazil.
Yeah.
I
know there's, of course, it was very early a small Jewish community, but it's not. Now, of course, I mainly work with all of these sources that came out of the Moravian Church, which is also one of sort of that opens some part of the history for me, but still, so I don't know so much about that. Are there any other questions?
How old was Matt? What year was she born?
We don't know, but I think she must have been born in the sort of maybe around 1680 or so. She's old when she dies. And I find her in a plantation list from 1721, when Carsten's father dies and leaves the mosquito bay plantation to Carsten's. There she is in the list. So at that time she's still enslaved.
But they don't indicate the age?
No.
At baptism?
No.
Well, we didn't know.
No. So you might indicate the age in sort of slave lists, because it's interesting how many years of work you might have for people, but it's more like if you're young, well, grown up or old. So.
And the information with regard to the general baptism that you spoke about, at that point, are they listed by name? Once they get their baptismal name, their general baptism, are there lists with those individuals? This is the question is based on the fact that I want to go, as you come forward, I want to go backwards. So I have a name of a person.
Yeah.
How do I get to the next step? That person was Catholic, but I'm figuring they might have been baptized Moravian first.
Yeah, in these early, you mean you actually want to see if you can find people's parents?
When she, no, she's African born. When she arrived, I want to see when approximately she may have arrived.
Okay. I couldn't say that, but you can, if you can find her in the baptismal records, of course, you would know that at that time she was there, but you wouldn't necessarily know when she came. In some of the lists, like the one I showed with Anna's name on it, there's an interesting thing actually, if I can go back. Is it just very slow? Yeah, here. In this list, that's sort of a list of all the high ranking or all the people who take communion in the church. So it's not everyone. But there you have like the person's name. Then it said who's the owner. Here it says free, but before that she was at the company plantation. And then born, and then the number refers to the baptismal list. And then there's also a small sort of personal description for all of these people, mainly referring to how good Christians they are. But some of the people here is not just born somewhere in Africa or born Creole, because they use the term Creole for somebody born in the island. But some of them, it says born St. Thomas, Fong, or born St. Thomas, Amina. So they describe people who were born in the islands, but who are also sort of have a nation. So that's interesting, because what does that tell us about, you know, these networks and families and how these identities were passed on in new generations? And I think that it was passed on much more than we know of. Obviously, I mean, if I, as a Dane, when I was a child, if my parents had moved to, you know, America, and of course I would have learned to speak Danish and be a Dane to some extent. But here we actually have some sort of evidence that it was passed on. But it's complicated because we also have Madlena's son Mingo, who is always described as a Creole, and he's sort of the essence of Creole because he's this. He travels back and forth to Europe for Carstens, and he writes letters, and he lives in town in a house, and he actually owns slaves, even though he's himself enslaved. It's complicated. But so we think there's not much, you know, like African to him, maybe, because often we see this opposition in African and Creole, but at the same time we think that he's the one who sort of wrote down Madlena's letter from her spoken words. So maybe that refers to the fact that he also, of course, spoke that language. Yeah.
Do you know if Mingo Key was named after him?
No.
You know what I'm talking about?
Where is that?
Oh, it's one of those little islands between St. John and St. Thomas.
Maybe, but
Lubongo,
it's a quite common name.
Oh,
and
okay.
it could be Mingo Tamarind also.
Okay.
But it would be nice though. You know? No, I'm working with sort of this Carstens Mingo, these people trying to make, it will turn out to some sort of biography writing, but I don't know quite how yet, but
Okay.
I'll look into that, yes.
You know, in the previous discussion, he was referring to the Danish society having a discussion about slavery and things, right? I'd like to say that in 1906, when they was contemplating the trade in, you know, America, Denmark, there was the lower house, the Lundsen, what do you call them, Lundsen or something like that. The lower house voted 32. They had a tie.
Okay.
And not transferring the Virgin Islands to America because they wanted the Virgin Islands people, the natives, to have a say in the transfer. At the same time, they wanted to guarantee American citizenship.
Yeah.
And they also wanted a flat sugar, you know, exported free with a free duty. The United States didn't want to go along with that, so I respect the Danish lower house for that. Because up to now, the same problem exists with our citizenship.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
To this day.
Yeah.
They just say the other day that we're not citizen by birth, we're citizen by act of Congress. So Congress can wake up one day and say, you're citizens of national, right? Hubert Harrison of Prussian, who used to be an agitator for the Organic Act, he was in Ellis Island on the same day that we got our citizenship. He was being there to be deported.
Okay.
So that particular position that the lower house of the Danish parliament took was very important and is affecting us up to this day because our, you know, Secretary of State didn't want to go along with it. It wasn't the Congress, it was the Secretary of State that didn't want to go along with us being citizens. Because remember, they have to do 2 citizenships. They have to do one in 26, and they have to do another one for the people in Cuba and Santo Domingo was cutting sugar cane. Yeah, I don't know.
I've been to this graveyard before. What does it say on their headstone?
The old stones are really hard to read. We were actually talking about, you know, if we could do something about it, but I'm not sure that the
well, how do you know she's buried there?
I know she's buried there from written sources, but
Do you
I'm
know
not
which
sure
one,
she
or?
would have a stone, and we don't know exactly when
Yeah.
or where.
Okay.
There were others also. Mingo, Madlena's son, was also buried there. So if you were a prominent member of the congregation, you would be allowed to be buried there as a sort of honor. But we don't know if they were just put in the line with the missionaries, which I somehow doubt, but I would love if they were. But it's something I continuously try to look for evidence about it. I really think that this is a very important site on St. Thomas because many things said, it's still also a place where people of African origin managed to participate and to also build themselves a place, because the church was built by the congregation. It was built around 1740. It's the oldest black Protestant church building in the New World. It's huge. I mean, it's...
The bell is still there too.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really a site.
No,
You should have tons and tons of tourists coming in just to look at this place.
Okay, so I was there, I walked around, and I met the people in the church, and they said, walk down the road on the other side of the church, and it was so overgrown, and the mosquitoes down me. But did you ever go down?
Yeah, I went actually this Sunday. No, this Monday.
So what's down there? Just more graves?
There's a rock where they say that the first sermons was held before they built the church. So, and also there's this sort of a small gut And in the descriptions, you can see how the first baptismals were done in a gut on the plantation before the church was built. So it's really historic place.
So there's no graves down there too, is there?
No.
Okay.
No. Yes.
I think a year or two ago there was a gentleman here from the Moravian Library, and he had a map like laying out where different groups of people might have been buried, male, female, married, unmarried, slaves, whatever.
Was that Paul Kruger?
Yes,
yes.
Okay, so I'll write him because, to see if I could see that, maybe.
His presentation is also on our YouTube channel for the
Okay.
library, so you can see the whole presentation that he
Great.
did.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Are there any more comments or questions? You're really good at concentrating your Friday night, I think. Yes?
After slavery was won, the Moravians brought in Chinese laborers. You know anything about that at all? How long they were contracted for?
No, I don't know so much.
Because
about
Chinaman
that.
Hill's right there by the airport.
Of course, I know a little in general, but I'm unfortunately very focused on the 18th century.
No problem. You can't know everything.
Can't know all. Yeah. So, all right. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.